The panel considered that there were other methods outside of the unitary plan to address natural hazards, for example, the Building Act. The panel confirmed, however, that the unitary plan provisions should acknowledge the functional needs of particular types of infrastructure to be located in hazard areas. And lastly, the panel expressed some concern in relation to how the natural hazards are considered in the subdivision provisions of the unitary plan. So in picking up on the panel's guidance and reviewing the submissions, the council's position was to put forward some amendments to more explicitly state that the risks of adverse effects from natural hazards in urban areas should not increase, and that in new areas should be avoided altogether. So that's consistent with the panel's approach, and just really tightening up some of the wording there. Council put forward amendments to specifically provide for rural activities within natural hazard areas where the risks can be managed. Council put forward an approach of natural hazard rules focused on flood hazards, coastal inundation, erosion and land instability. So that was submitted saying, clarify exactly what natural hazards the unitary plan is controlling. So the council did clarify that those were the specific hazards that the unitary plan was seeking to control through rules. And there were some specific design requirements for buildings within the hazard areas. In the notified plan, the council proposed that they should be deleted. Sorry, I've just skipped ahead there. Rural activities, okay, sorry, skipped ahead. So the last bullet point, that the likely effects of climate change need to be considered in relation to all hazards. So the council continued to adopt that approach. Amendments proposed to more properly provide for infrastructure in hazard areas where it's functionally required to be there. Amendments proposed the subdivision provisions to align them with the natural hazard provisions, strengthening assessment where required when subdividing in natural hazard areas, and this is the one I skipped to, specific design requirements for buildings within flood hazard areas were proposed to be deleted, thereby removing the potential for direct conflict with the Building Act. And the next series of slides really just go into a bit more detail around specific hazards, and they are quite detailed and fairly technical in nature, so it's really just the question as to whether you'd like us to carry on, or we can respond to any questions that you might have after reading the presentation in your own time.
Okay. John, could you just speak some more about the interim guidance regarding the panel's concern in relation to how natural hazards are considered in the subdivision provisions? I know you picked that up in terms of council's response, but what was their concern in a bit more detail, and what changes did we make in response to that?
It's probably one for Lara.
So the subdivision topic followed the natural hazards topic in the hearing schedule. The way in the notified plan that it was represented, there was more specific reference to flood hazards than there were to the full suite of hazards which are controlled through the rules. So what we really did there was look at the subdivision provisions and tie them a bit more strongly to the policies and the policy direction around the coastal hazards and around the land stability hazards, so that those areas were more clearly identified. So when you're looking to subdivide, you'd not only be considering flood hazard areas, but you'd also be considering some of those other hazard areas more specifically. So
the panel's concern was more about connecting the dots, as it were, between the policies and the rules?
That's the way that we interpreted that concern, yes.
Right, thanks.
Any other questions on it? Councillor Cashmore.
Just the sea rise 2 metre deal, just a bit more information about that. Is that going to be for, again, is it going to be covering alterations or just new or additions, etc.?
Okay, so the way that the sea level rise component was incorporated in the notified plan, we had it as a policy consideration, and it was to be considered for new development or greenfield development, and for that significant infrastructure, which my colleagues have talked about earlier today. There weren't any particular rules associated with that 2 metre sea level rise inclusion. Through the hearings process and after receiving the panel's guidance, we looked again at the inclusion of that 2 metre figure, and in council's closing position we've taken out that reference to the 2 metre specifically and replaced it with a consideration of a longer term sea level rise, which enables the most recent guidance, the most recent IPCC or Ministry for the Environment projections to be considered, but there aren't any specific rules associated with that area. It's more of a structure planning and a major infrastructure consideration.
Lose a degree of certainty, Madam Chair, potentially?
I guess we might have to see what comes back
Through on that, yeah.
to us. Yeah. Councillor Webster.
Sorry, John, maybe you could talk to me about this later. I mean, obviously, the coastal hazards one is going to be quite important in parts of the north of here. Can you just talk to me about where we got to with hard versus natural protections?
Yep. To that.
Do we want to do
Yeah.
that when we get to that bit, John? We could maybe.
Well,
I just thought he was going to just.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm
okay.
suggesting there
I
are
just
there
wondered
are
if you
16
wanted to
slides and
just-
some of them do get very
Okay.
detailed and technical. So
Sorry, I just.
No, that's good.
I
All I was
just-
going to do was just kind of go, you know, wildfire.
We don't need that.
Wildfire, instability, liquefaction.
Liquefaction.
What worries you? Pick your worry.
Well,
Right,
my worry is coastal.
erosion.
But I mean, I don't want to hold up the
No,
meeting.
it's good. That's what this is for.
So I've just skipped forward to the council's position on coastal hazards. So apologies. The question again was, Councillor Webster, just coastal defences. Okay. Someone there? No.
It was more you said something about
Here we go.
hard
So
versus
council's
soft.
position on coastal defences on the screen there. Really enhancement and maintaining existing natural defences should be provided for. So make that a permitted activity if you're essentially stabilising an existing sand dune, for example, with planting. That shouldn't have to go through a resource consent. Yeah, so that was the first point, but still maintaining that approach of a preference for soft engineering rather than hard engineering solutions.
I think just building on what John said there, that's one of the key links, I guess, back to the New Zealand Coastal Policy Statement. That national policy direction does direct the resource management plans to prefer natural defences where you can and to avoid hard engineering where you can. Obviously, it recognises in certain circumstances hard engineering might be needed, and that's where the last bullet point there around the assessment really reflects looking at what the activity is that is being protected and how those defences are designed to make sure that they are really addressing as many of the potential adverse effects as possible. The other issue with the use of hard defences is the effects on the neighbouring properties or the rest of the coastal area, and so it's trying to ensure that there's a really good consideration of all of those potential effects alongside the need for the defence and the activity that it protects.
I suppose we can't, I mean, we won't know until we get some examples, but you know, I think this is going to be a big issue in some areas, how quickly we are able to, and that will depend on whether it's discretionary or restricted discretionary. Yep, thank you.
Other hazardous issues? Anything else you want to add?
No, that's it really. So
Okay.
that's the last of the topics.
Well, on the 22nd.
Crikey. So just as was explained, this is, you know, hopefully we've had a chance to go through, understand what all the topics, how we got to where we got to with all the topics, so that when it all comes back to us, we can go back to the excellent presentations that we've had and remind ourselves of what we said. And the last workshop will be reminding us of the process to go through from here. So any other questions?
Can I just remind you, we've also sent out a form for you to work with your support staff to come back to us if there are specific topics, and I know a number of councillors have already come back to us with some specific topics or questions that you might want to ask between now and the 22nd of July. So,
And
to the
the,
council.
and just also for the local boards, working on the process by which the local boards are given all of the information that they may need through this process. Councillor Casey.
Oh, it was just to ask formally about the public awareness campaign. I missed the email from Carol Ferguson, and I guess a couple of my colleagues might have too. So could you maybe explain the relevance of the, for example, the infomercial in this morning's Herald?
So as Councillor Casey has indicated, you should have all received an email from Carl Ferguson, who's the Director of Communications, last week, talking about a public awareness campaign. This is really building on the interest that has been expressed in a number of different media about the wider housing issue affecting Auckland, and really, if you think of the Auckland conversation a couple of weeks ago, there was quite a lot of energy around what is happening around housing. And so what the memo sets out is that we've put in place a relationship with the New Zealand Herald, where they are going to give us a platform of being able to speak about all the work that the council is doing in the housing space. The first one was the interview with Dean Kimpton, where he talked about the survey about housing awareness, the housing challenge, which was a survey of a number of different people in the community and the challenges they faced in actually acquiring or getting the housing that they need for their particular purposes. And he also touched on the fact that housing choice was something that was important from the Auckland plan and what we've tried to incorporate into the unitary plan. But then the rest of the interview goes on to really just reminding people about all the things that are happening in the housing space in terms of the special housing areas, the consents that we're receiving to build new houses and subdivision. So it is an awareness campaign. It is about making sure that everybody is aware of what the council is doing in that housing space. It is also will be reminding people of the process that the unitary plan is following, both up to the decisions, but also once the decision has been made by this council, we'll be informing the community about that.
All right. Thank you all for your attendance today. It is appreciated to our staff, and to our loyal members of the public, and our local boards. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Kia ora.
Yeah.